but one of the oldest traditions is embracing wild new ideas. I came to see firsthand how Bostonians, from the American Revolution to today, have been solving big problems with bold ideas. It's brought me underground to the first subway in America.
Take a look at that. So this is the old station down here, and the new train is going right over it. This is one of the few places in the whole system where you can see something like that.
Locals call it the T. With 885 miles of track and over 1 million riders a day, Bostonians count on it to keep the city moving. But it wasn't always like this. When they dug the first tunnels underground, they uncovered mass graves, suffered deadly explosions, and were afraid of unleashing apocalyptic plagues. Historian Brad Clark is taking me to one of the tunnels men died to build, but now is nearly forgotten.
Lot of rats, and sometimes you have homeless living here. So it lay dormant and has been dormant since 1961.
50 years, amazing.
Over the years, the city shut down many lines once there was no longer a demand for them. This quarter-mile of track under downtown was once a vital part of the original phase of the subway system.
Well, you can feel we're on quite a grade here.
Oh, yeah.
We're really leaving one world and into another, aren't we?
Absolutely.
It's how a lot of people must have felt when the subway broke ground in 1895. Most households in Boston didn't even have electric lights. The idea of an electric train underground was as bizarre as a flight to the moon.
This had to have blown people's mind, the idea of going underground to actually take a train, which we take so for granted today.
That was the fear of the darkness, the fear of possible disease.
Boston newspapers claimed that the project would unleash a deadly microbe that could decimate the city. And soon after construction started, workers unearthed 900 skeletons, including British soldiers from the Battle of Bunker Hill. But the traffic in downtown was so hellish, with trolleys gridlocked for hours, city officials pushed on.
So this track actually curves down, and the other track, which was side by side with us before, is over our heads.
That's right. At this point, the subway is 4 tracks wide. It went from 2 to 4. This is a massive structure called the Flying Junction. T didn't build another one of these till 1970.
They really kind of pushed the envelope on what could be done in America, didn't they?
They sure did.
While Boston's rival New York City spoiled the scenery with elevated trains, Boston took its cue from London and a handful of other European cities that had subterranean rail lines.
Why did it happen differently here than elsewhere?
Engineering expertise. Harvard and MIT were here, and the folks that ran the Boston Transit Commission that built this place actually were largely from those 2 institutions.
So local brain power gets this idea started that let's imitate what happened in London, and let's do it our own way here.
Local brain power, but no machine power.
Okay.
Most of this tunnel was dug by hand. They used a method called cut and cover.
Cut and cover meant working in small sections at a time, digging a trench 12 feet wide and covering it with strong timbers so the tunneling could continue without stopping traffic above. A method that would have helped the city 100 years later when Boston buried the I-93 expressway. The big dig caused a traffic nightmare and went billions of dollars over budget despite having 150 cranes and enough land movers to fill a stadium 12 times. The original subway was a model of efficiency by comparison, even though 19th century workers, called sandhogs, did it all with hand tools. It took nerves of steel to dig around a maze of sewer and gas lines. One leaky pipe exploded, killing 9 men. And even when the working conditions weren't deadly, they were still nasty.
Pretty foul environment down here. And, oh, lovely, look at this. If you want to see what, we got a whole culture of cockroaches living down here. Hello, boys. This would be the pump room right here. If you're going to run anything this deep underground, you're always going to get below the water table. So these old pumps were here to pump things out. You see how dark and dangerous this looks? I mean, everybody in America was basically saying, what are you, crazy? You're going to run a railway underground? So the first step they had to take was to basically make it look as friendly as possible, as user-friendly. Covering it, lining it with plaster, painting the place bright white, illuminating it with new Edison light bulbs. They made this place beautiful. Like, why wouldn't you want to ride down here?
Builders tried to make their underground marvel reassuringly familiar to potential commuters.
So what was running down here first?
Originally, tiny open streetcars.
They literally put what was running above ground underground.
Yes, they did.
Like the trolleys of the day, the cars drew their electricity through overhead poles, not the deadly third rail used by modern subways.
So this was the actual infrastructure of that?
Yeah, that's called trolley wire up on the top.
Yeah.
It's made of drawn brass and bronze.
But the tunnels were so narrow that doing maintenance work down here could be a deadly occupation.
These niches are here for people to take refuge in to get out of the way of moving cars. But it really speaks to the time. There was a space every 3 feet. They were just, you know, placating fears.
Boston's subway gamble paid off. On opening day in 1897, 100,000 riders eagerly hopped on board. Since then, the T has been growing and evolving. By the 1960s, Bostonians were so confident in their underground lair, they believed it could save them from a new terror: nuclear apocalypse.
This is a whole nother tube that goes off into, wow, look at this mess.
Yep, filled with civil defense supplies from the 1960s.
Man. So all of this is stacked up. This was a storage place for the nuclear holocaust that was to come. The Office of Civil Defense, Department of Defense, 17.5 gallons of who knows what in there. Look at that. I can see all the way down there. I mean, it's hundreds of feet back there. There's just thousands of these survival supplies. Boy, it is a glimpse of another era, you know, still rusting away under the Boston streets. Oh, here we go. So this is the end right here.
Yep, this is the end of the subway.
A few hundred yards beyond this wall is the I-90 expressway. We've walked a quarter mile under one of the busiest sections of downtown.
And this was the point of this whole system, was that people could get underneath, and the result was immediate.
Clear streets.
Cleared everything up.
The subway eventually replaced 400 trolley cars and cut down on the scrum of automobiles, wagons, and daring pedestrians that made downtown Boston a nightmare to navigate.
Yeah. Ah, the fresh air of downtown Boston.
It's home to the oldest and some of the best colleges in the U.S. But in spite of all that brain power, it took Boston centuries to figure out you don't where you eat.
In the 1870s, Boston was booming. The American Revolution was a century past, and the Industrial Revolution was changing everything. But cholera, typhoid, and dysentery were threatening a growing city. The local leaders had to do something to solve the problem.
The solution was an innovative sewage superhighway under the city, one of the first centralized sewers in the country. Part of that original system is still in use, 5 miles south of downtown in Dorchester. Once again, I'm going to see how Boston used its underground to save the city above. Only this time, it's going to be a lot nastier.
Tom?
Hey, Don, how you doing?
Tom Badgley is a 20-year veteran of the Boston Water and Sewer Commission, and he's getting me into a 130-year-old tunnel off limits to civilians. Not that they want in.
Yeah, it's pretty far down there.
How deep is this
About
thing?
30 feet.
30 feet?
Yeah.
And have you ever been down there?
Never been down there. You know, I think today might be my day.
Tetanus, hepatitis A, and E. coli are all lurking down there. So we need antimicrobial protective gear.
So this was built in, like, what year?
This was, they started construction on it in 1877.
Yeah.
And was completed around 1884.
So the basic problem is you got a system designed for a small population, and suddenly there's a big population.
There's a big population.
What is it like? What are the results of that?
Results of that is
It stinks.
A lot of sewage everywhere.
Just about every drop of drinking water in Boston was contaminated with the sewage leaking from outhouses and a hodgepodge of privately owned sewer pipes. As the number of toilets in the city went from 6,500 to 100,000 in the late 1800s, the death rate from disease doubled. The tunnel we're entering today was part of a life-saving solution. It has an impressive name, the Interceptor, and heroically collects the wastewater in South Boston. It was part of a 25-mile-long system called the Main Drainage Works, spread out beneath the entire city. There's no ladder, just a 30-foot drop, a thin cable, and some guys I don't know. We'll have to stay tethered near the entrance shaft in case the fumes knock us out. Tom has no idea how much fun he's in for.
Just gonna hold?
Yeah, it'll be fine, don't worry.
All over me. Why me?
So they're bleaching down the cable that just went down with Tom because there's so much disgusting stuff on it. That does not speak well of the experience I am about to have. There's a hole in my booth. That's reassuring, isn't it? Don't hold back with that tape. When in doubt, duct tape.
Keep coming down.
Here goes my feet, right? Oh, it kind of feels good. All right. Hey, Tom.
Yeah, I get it now.
All righty.
Slippery down here.
All right.
The trick to exploring a sewer is to not think about what you're standing in. Not easy to do down here.
Well, there's some nice scummy flow going down. Did you slip off this thing and fall? You are covered in doo-doo, man.
Yeah, when we were coming down, I got hit with some probably old rust and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know,
You got a meter over here bleeping.
exactly.
What is that bleeping for?
That's just letting us know that it's fine. You know, if it's a constant beep, that means we have to leave.
We're protected by 21st century tech, but the men who built this tunnel were working with simple tools. And unlike other cities, these guys had to deal with treacherous coastal sand and mud while building a watertight structure.
We're talking 131 years of brickwork that is still working today.
They had some really skilled artisans back then. You can tell by the brickwork it's still intact. Believe it or not, this interceptor was a prime example of the state-of-the-art pipe at the time.
So how far back does this pipe go?
It goes back a couple of miles.
Couple of miles.
Yeah.
Okay.
These old tunnels did a great job of getting the sewage out of the city. The problem was at the end of the line. All this filth was just dumped into Boston's harbor.
They'd build a pipe like this, the Boston Main Interceptor, and they'd let it go out to the harbor, low tide, and the tide would take it out.
To be fair to Boston, everybody did it this way.
Everybody. And don't forget, at that time, the sewage was not treated.
None of the sewage up to our knees has been treated either, and Tom's had enough.
A little further, a little further.
Don't look up, Tom. I did that already. Good luck and don't go too far, please.
All right, send them up. Have a good lunch.
Oh, the air smells much better.
All right. I'm gonna try to do this without falling over. Very slippery with human waste. So the slightest miscalculation and the camera woman went over. Don't put it in your mouth. Her bare hand went right into the water, and let me check. Oh, she's really grossed out. All right. It's the design and the brickwork that really kind of take the breath away, along with the disgusting smells. Oh, hello. That's gross. We're looking at basically a flat bottom until it gets to right here. And this is a culvert in the middle so that basically it concentrates the flow.
Gravity propelled the sewage through tunnels like this, keeping it out of the groundwater. It all flowed into a main line that eventually emptied into the ocean, less than a mile offshore.
So this is old Boston learning to clean itself up, moving the sewage out to the harbor.
This tunnel helped clean up Boston's drinking water, but at a steep price, poisoning the bay that built the city. It took about 100 years for the city to stop pumping muck into the harbor, and I'm going topside to see what happens to that ocean of waste today.